Lisa Monroe had spent 20 years digging through the ruins of dead civilizations on distant worlds. She had seen temples older than Earth's oceans and cities that crumbled to dust before the first fish crawled onto land, but nothing had prepared her for what she found in the black caves of Set. Symbols on the wall should not have existed. They were too familiar, too close to something she had seen in her grandmother's books about ancient Earth. Cave paintings from France, from Spain, from the deep places where early humans had left their mark. But this world was 40,000 light years from Earth, and these ruins were dated 6 million years old. The stone with her gloved hand and felt something cold move through her chest. Fear, maybe, or wonder. She could not tell the difference anymore. Stood behind her with a scanning device in his hands. He was young and smart, and he trusted her when no one else did. That trust had brought him here to this forgotten corner of the galaxy where the Galactic Congress said nothing important had ever happened. Conger was wrong. Lisa knew that in her bones. She scanned and looked at the results. His face went pale under the blue light of his equipment. He tried to speak, but the words would not come out at first. When they finally did, his voice was barely a whisper. Gwisk pattern matched. These symbols, carved in stone 60 million years before humans supposedly existed, followed the same basic structure as proto-human communication. The same patterns that eventually became language on Earth. The same patterns that led to words and writing and everything that made humanity what it was. She took photographs and samples. She recorded everything he could. Then she and returned to their small ship and left 7 behind. But she knew she would never really leave that cave. What she had found there would follow her forever. Months later, Lisa stood before the Galactic Congress High Council on the station called Harmony Prime. The chamber was vast and filled with representatives from 100 different species. Most of them looked at her with polite disinterest. Humans were the youngest members of the Congress. They had only joined 3 centuries ago, and in galactic terms that was less than a heartbeat. No one expected humans to contribute anything important to the great work of understanding the universe. Master of the sat in the highest seat. His species had been spacefaring for 3 million years. They had helped write the laws that governed the conquered. They had mapped stars when humanity's ancestors were still living in trees. At least, that was what everyone believed. Presented her evidence. She showed the photographs from 7 and 12 other worlds she had visited over the past 2 decades. She displayed the linguistic analysis that had refined and checked 1,000 times. She laid out a pattern that stretched across the galaxy, a trail of symbols and structures that all pointed back to one impossible conclusion. It had been here before. Not 300 years ago when Earth first made contact with alien life. Not 12,000 years ago when human civilization supposedly began. But 60 million years in the past, before the dinosaurs died, before the world humanity knew had even taken shape. The council listened in silence. When Lise finished, a leaned forward and spoke in his slow, careful way. He thanked her for her work. He praised her dedication. And then he dismissed everything she had said. Patterns were coincidence, he explained. The universe was vast and random, and sometimes things looked connected when they were not. Human brains were especially good at finding patterns that did not exist. This was a known weakness of the species. The council appreciated her enthusiasm, but they could not overturn millions of years of established history based on a few photographs and some creative analysis. So wanted to argue. She wanted to stand there and fight until they understood, but put his hand on her arm and guide her out of the chamber. He knew that arguing would only make things worse. They had too much power and too much pride. They would never admit that their understanding of the galaxy might be wrong. At night, Lisa sat alone in her quarters and stared at the walls. She thought about giving up. She thought about going home to Earth and finding some quiet job where she could forget about caves and symbols and the cold feeling in her chest that would not go away. Her communication panel lit up with an incoming message. The sender was blocked, hidden behind layers of encryption that should have been impossible for anyone outside the highest levels of government. Lisa opened the message anyway. It contained coordinates, just numbers, no explanation, no signature. But attached to the coordinates was a single image, a planet covered in silver towers and surrounded by rings of ancient satellites. And beneath the image, 3 words that made Lisa's heart stop. Prime sealed archives. In the galaxy knew about Prime. It was the great mystery, the locked door that no one could open. 50 million years ago, the beings called the Precursors had sealed the planet and vanished from the universe. No species had ever been allowed inside. The Conqueror had tried for centuries to gain access, but the planet's defenses were absolute. Ships that approached too close simply disappeared. Someone was telling Lisa that the answers she sought were there, on that forbidden world. Someone wanted her to go where no one else could. Should have reported the message. She should have told the authorities and let them handle it. That was the safe choice, the smart choice. But Lisa had not spent 20 years chasing ghosts because she wanted to be safe or smart. Called and told him to pack his things. Then she contacted an old friend named Daniel who commanded a research vessel called the Horizon. Daniel owed her favors from years past, and he was one of the few people she trusted completely. Morning, they were gone from Harmony Prime. The council did not notice their departure. Humans came and went all the time, and no one paid attention to where they traveled. Lisa knew that would change soon. When they realized where she was going, they would try to stop her. They would do anything to protect the order they had built over millions of years. And if what Lisa suspected was true, if humans really had been the first, then that order was built on a lie. Stood at the window of the horizon and watched the stars blur past as they jumped to faster than light speed. Somewhere ahead, Prime weighed with its secrets and its silence. And somewhere deep inside Lisa, the cold feeling had changed. It was not fear anymore. It was hope. It looked like a jewel floating in darkness. Silver towers rose from its surface and caught the light of 3 distant suns. Rings of satellites circled the planet in perfect formation, unchanged after 50 million years. Nothing decayed here, nothing aged. Wherever the Precursors had built, they had built to last forever. Daniel stood on the bridge of the horizon and watched the planet grow larger on them. He had commanded this ship for 15 years, and he had seen wonders that most people could not imagine. But Prime was different. This was the forbidden place, the world that swallowed ships and never gave them back. Stood beside him with at her shoulder. Behind them, a security officer named Amy checked her weapons for the 3rd time. Amy did not trust the mission. She did not trust the anonymous message that had led them here. But she trusted Lisa, and that was enough. Or had given them permission to investigate. Lisa had presented her evidence again, this time to a smaller council that included species who were not loyal to them. They had listened more carefully, and they had agreed that the patterns she found deserved further study. But they had also sent observers to make sure humans did not do anything foolish. Scientists occupied the rear section of the bridge. They watched everything with their large dark eyes and said very little. Lisa could feel their suspicion like heat on her skin. They were here to control the situation, not to help. It brought the horizon into orbit around Prime. Alarms began flashing across every console. The planet's defense systems were activating, scanning the ship, deciding whether to destroy it or let it pass. Everyone on the bridge held their breath. Something strange happened. The alarm stopped. The defense systems went quiet, and a signal came through the communication array, clear and strong despite being 50 million years old. It was a wild message in English. Quickly to analyze the signal, his hands shook as he pulled Dave from his console and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The message was not exactly English, he explained. It was something older, something that had eventually become the language humanity spoke today. The archive recognized them. It was inviting them inside. Observers exchanged worried looks. One of them stepped forward and demanded that the humans wait. He said they needed to contact the Conquered and report the development. He said protocols must be followed. So ignored him. She told Daniel to take them down. Ryan descended through clouds of shimmering particles that might have been dust or might have been something else entirely. The silver towers grew taller as they approached, and Lisa could see now that they were covered in symbol. The same symbols she had found on Seven. The same patterns that had led her across the galaxy to the moon. Landed on a platform of smooth white stone. When Lisa stepped out of the ship, the air smelled like rain on hot pavement. It smelled like earth. He led the way with her weapon raised, followed with his scan equipment. The observers stayed close behind, recording everything they saw, and Lisa walked at the center of the group, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. So the main archive was a door 300 meters tall. It was covered in carvings that showed figures walking among stars, building cities, creating life on barren worlds. The figures were not human exactly. Their bodies were longer and their heads were shaped differently, but they had 2 arms and 2 legs and they stood upright like people. Lisa approached the door and placed her hand on its surface. A light passed over her palm, warm and gentle. Then the door began to open. Inside, the archive stretched farther than Lisa could see. Towers of crystal held data in forms she could not understand. Machines hummed with power that had never faded. Lights guided them forward along a path that seemed designed specifically for them, as if the archive had been waiting all this time for exactly these visitors. At a console covered in symbols, he ran his fingers over them and watched as the machine responded to his touch. Screens lit up around him, showing information that made his eyes go wide. Central database was written in a language that had eventually become Sumerian, one of the oldest forms of writing on Earth, one of the first steps humanity had taken towards civilization. But this version was older and more complex, and it contained knowledge that humans had forgotten they ever possessed. He found something too, a weapon system buried beneath the floor, designed to defend the archive from anyone who tried to harm it. The system scanned her and recognized something in her DNA. It marked her as friendly as family. Then it showed her how to use it if she ever needed to. Observers were no longer hiding their fear. They demanded that the humans stop touching things. They said this was dangerous and irresponsible. They said the Conqueror would hear about this. Lisa did not care what the Conqueror heard. She had found what she was looking for, and nothing was going to stop her from learning the truth. Walked deeper into the archive until she reached a chamber at its heart. The chamber was circular and empty, except for a single pedestal in the center. On the pedestal sat a sphere of light that pulsed slowly like a beating heart. As approached, the sphere began to change. Images formed in the air around her. Images of Earth 60 million years ago, when different creatures walked its surface and different skis hung overhead. Images of those creatures building ships and leaving their home behind. Images of them spreading across the galaxy, helping other species grow, creating the foundation of everything that exists today. Precursors had come from Earth. They were not alien. They were human in a way that everything the galaxy believed about history. So watched the images and felt tears running down her face. She had been right. All those years of searching, all those colleagues who called her crazy, all those councils that dismissed her work, she had been right. Her in the chamber and watched the display with wonder on his face. Amy stood guard at the entrance, keeping the observers at a safe distance, and Daniel watched from the doorway, understanding now why Lisa had risked everything to come here. Sphere pulsed one more time and then showed something new. A map of Earth with a location marked in what would become the Sahara Desert, and words that appeared in the air like a promise written in light. Gift for our children when you are ready, when you find your way home. Lisa knew what she had to do next. The archive had given her the truth, but the truth was only the beginning. The real treasure was waiting back on Earth, buried beneath sand and time, and when humanity found it, everything would change. Turned to face the observers and smiled. They could report whatever they wanted to the Conquered. It did not matter anymore. The secret was out and no one could put it back. As memory halls stretched in every direction like an endless forest of light and crystal, Lisa walked through them slowly, touching consoles that hummed to life at her prison. Every machine recognized her. Every system opened for her like doors welcoming a long-lost daughter home. Beside her, recording everything. His scanners captured data faster than he could process it. There was too much here, too many secrets packed in towers that reached toward a ceiling lost in shadow. It would take centuries to understand it all, but they did not have centuries. They barely had hours. But if their discovery had spread faster than light, the observers had contacted their government the moment the archive opened its doors. Now ships were coming from every corner of the galaxy. Elder species who had built their power on being first, on being oldest, on knowing more than anyone else. They were coming to see the evidence that proved them wrong. Council arrived on a warship surrounded by a fleet of escorts. He was the supreme leader of the voice of the oldest surviving civilization in known space. His people had ruled the Conquered for millions of years, and they had done so because everyone believed they deserved to rule. They had been here the longest. They had earned their place. If humans were truly the children of the precursors, then everything changed. But were not elders at all. They were younger siblings who had simply forgotten their family history. And at entry to the archive, the defense system scanned him and found nothing in his DNA that matched the precursor template. Access. He demanded again, louder this time, with threats hidden beneath his careful words. The archive did not respond to threats. Well, Grace arrived 3 hours later with a human battle group. She was tall and gray-haired, a veteran of conflicts that most humans had tried to forget. The United Earth government had sent her to protect Lisa's team and to ensure that no one destroyed the evidence before it could be properly studied. It's met with unneutral ground, a platform floating between their respective fleets. Lisa watched from the horizon bridge as the two leaders faced each other across a table that seemed far too small for the weight of what they were discussing. The archive sealed again. He said the knowledge inside was too dangerous. He said it would destabilize the Conquered and lead to wars that could destroy everything they had built together. He said humanity was not ready for their responsibility. He slid in politely and then refused. She said the archive belonged to humanity by right of blood and heritage. She said humans would share what they learned with everyone, but they would not let anyone destroy or hide the truth. She said the Concord had been built on incomplete information, and now it was time to correct that. Not accept her answer. He returned to his worship and began coordinating with other elder species who had arrived during the negotiation. The who claimed to be the Saiyan oldest civilization, the collective, who controlled more territory than any other group, the silent ones, who rarely spoke but always watched. They all agreed that humanity must be stopped. So did not know about the gathering storm outside. She was too deep in the archive, following paths that led her toward secrets she had never imagined. Walked beside her, translating symbols that grew more complex the further they went. And then they found the Chamber of Memories. Smaller than the entrance hall, but more beautiful. Walls of flowing light showed images that moved and breathed like living things. And the images told a story that broke Lisa's heart and healed it at the same time. A million years ago, humanity's ancestors had faced a choice. They had grown too powerful. Their technology could reap stars and move planets. Their knowledge exceeded anything that had existed before or since. But power had changed them. They had become distant from the younger species they had helped create. They had forgotten what it meant to struggle, to grow, to earn wisdom through suffering. Chose to start over. They returned to Earth and used their technology to reset their own evolution. They became simple creatures again, animals that would spend millions of years climbing back toward awareness. They hid their knowledge in archives across the galaxy, sealed behind doors that would only open for their descent. It was not a punishment, it was a gift. The chance to experience everything again, to feel wonder at the stars, to make discoveries that seemed new even though they were really remembering. The precursors had given their children the most precious thing they could imagine, a Saiyan beginning. She sat down on the chamber floor and cried, sat beside her and held her hand. Neither of them spoke for a long time. They finally left the chamber. Amy was waiting with news. The elder species had formed an alliance. Their combined fleet surrounded the Sol system. They were demanding that humanity surrender all precursor technology and knowledge, or they would blockade Earth until humans agreed. Lisa was preparing to fight. Her battle group was outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but she refused to back down. Human history, human heritage, human identity, these things were worth dying for. So knew she had to do something. The archive had shown her the location of the precursor's gift on Earth. If that gift contained what she suspected, it could change everything. It could give humanity the power to defend itself without starting a war that would destroy everyone. Grace told her the plan. They needed to get back to Earth as fast as possible. They needed to reach the Sahara before the blockade became complete. And they needed to pray that the precursors had left something behind that could save their children from the mess they had inherited. Lisa agreed. She ordered her ships to form a protective formation around the horizon. Then she sent a message to the Allied fleets, buying time with words while Lisa prepared for departure. I've seemed to know what was happening. As Lisa walked toward the exit, lights followed her path like a blessing. Machines powered down as if the building itself was going to sleep after being awake for so long. And the sphere at the heart of the memory hall pulsed one final time, sending a single message to Lisa's personal communicator. Believe in you, we always have. Now go home and claim what is yours. Lisa boarded the horizon and told Daniel to fly like their lives depended on it, because they did. Horizon burst out of fast and light travel at the edge of the Sol system and found chaos waiting. Thousands of alien ships hung in the dark between Neptune and Uranus, their weapons powered and their shields raised. The blockade was already forming, a wall of metal and energy designed to keep humanity trapped on their little world forever. Lisa's battle group emerged seconds later and immediately took defensive positions around the horizon. Her ships were faster and more maneuverable than the alien vessels, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Every captain knew they were flying toward death. None of them turned back. Pushed the horizon's engine past their safety limits. The ship groaned and shook as it accelerated toward Earth, dying between any formations that were still organizing themselves. The aliens had not expected humans to run the blockade so quickly. They had assumed there would be negotiations, delays, the careful dance of diplomacy that usually precede conflict. They did not understand that Lisa had no time for dancing. Appeared on the blue and green and heartbreaking beautiful. Lisa had grown up on that world, walked its forests, swam in its ocean. She had left to chase mysteries among the stars, but she had never stopped loving the place where her story began. Now she understood that Earth's story was older than anyone had dreamed. The planet had given birth to the galaxy's first great civilization, and it was about to give birth to something new. And Cole was waiting when they landed. He was a calm man with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much. He had read Lisa's reports and watched the recordings from Prime. He understood what was at stake, and he had already made his decision. The Earth government would not surrender. Humanity would not give up its heritage to satisfy the fears of species who had built their power on forgetting where they came from. If the elder races wanted war, Earth would give them war. But first, they would try one more thing. We met them at the excavation site. She commanded Earth Planetary Defense Forces, and she had been preparing for the moment since the first alien ships appeared at the system's edge. Engineers and soldiers surrounded a hole in the desert sand that grew deeper by the hour. Machines dug through rock and sediment that had not been disturbed since before the dinosaurs died. Alongside the engineers, using Dave from the archive to guide them toward the target. The precursor complex was buried nearly a kilometer beneath the surface, protected by layers of material that no natural process could have created. Whatever weighed down there, the original humans had wanted it to survive anything the universe could throw at it. Stood at the edge of the excavation and watched the sun set over the Sahara. The sky turned orange and red and purple, colors that her ancestors had watched 6 million years ago before they made their great choice. She wondered if they had been afraid. She wondered if they had doubted themselves. She wondered if they had known their children would one day stand here, digging through time to find the gifts they left behind. Breakthrough came at midnight. The drilling machine broke through into a chamber that should not have existed. Lights activated inside the chamber, responding to the presence of humans nearby, and then the complex began to wake up. It was enormous. Corridors stretched for kilometers in every direction. Hangars held ships that made the horizon look like a toy. Armories contained weapons that could crack plants open like eggs. Metal bays promised cures for diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. And at the center of it all, a library that made the Prime Archive seem small. Through the armory was something close to religious awe on her face. The weapons were designed for human hands, scaled for human bodies. They recognized her authority and offered themselves to her command. In minutes, she had access to a defensive system that could hold off every fleet in the galaxy. Activated the planetary shield first. A dome of energy spread across Earth's sky, invisible but impenetrable. The alien ships at the system's edge detected the power surge and stopped their advance. They had never seen anything like it. Their sensors could not even measure the energy output. So found the message in the library. It was stored in a crystal sphere similar to the one on Prime, waiting patiently for someone to come and listen. She held the sphere in her hands and watched as light flowed from it into the air around her. A figure appeared. It looked almost human, tall and graceful with kind eyes that seemed to hold the weight of ages. The figure spoke in a language at least should not have understood but somehow did. The message was simple. The precursors had made mistakes. They had grown too proud, too isolated, too certain of their own wisdom. They had helped other species but never truly joined them. They had stood apart when they should have stood together. So it was meant to fix that. Humanity would grow up surrounded by others, learning from them, depending on them. When humans finally remembered who they were, they would understand something the precursors never had. Connection mattered more than power. Friendship mattered more than dominance. The galaxy did not need rulers, it needed partners. The gift was not just technology, it was a second chance to get things right. So carried the sphere out of the library and found Grace in waiting. She told them what she had learned. She told them what she thought they should do next. It would be easy to use the precursor weapons and drive the alien fleets away. It would be easy to claim the power that was rightfully theirs and force the conqueror to accept human leadership. But that was the old way, the way that had led the original humans to reset themselves in shame. There was another option, harder, riskier, but right. Not like it at first. Grace needed time to think, but President Cole listened to Lisa's plan and nodded slowly. He understood what she was suggesting. He understood what it would cost, and he agreed that some things were worth more than safety. Exploring Earth sent a message to the gathered fleets. It was not a demand or a threat, it was an invitation. Lisa wanted to talk, and she wanted everyone to listen. Galaxy was about to change. The only question was whether it would change through fear or through hope. Galactic Conrad's cattle station was called Unity, though it had never truly lived up to its name. For millions of years, the station had served as a meeting place where elder species gathered to decide the fate of younger ones. Hierarchies were built into its walls, its seating arrangements, its very architecture. Those who arrived first sat highest. Those who came later sat below, and humans had always sat at the bottom. It was different. Lisa walked into the high assembly chamber and felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes upon her. Representatives from every known species filled the circular room, arranged in tiers that rose toward a domed ceiling painted with stars. They sat at the top as they always had. The humans sat at the bottom as they always had. But the energy in the room had changed. Everyone knew that the seats no longer reflected reality. The counselor called the assembly to order. His voice was calm and controlled, but Lisa could see the tension in his movements. His species had spent millions of years at the top of the galactic order. Now that order was crumbling, and he did not know how to stop it. So rose from her seat and walked to the speaking platform at the center of the chamber. She carried no weapons, no documents, no symbols of authority. She carried only the truth and the hope that the truth would be enough. Began telling the story, not the full history that the archives contained, but the essential parts. Humanity's ancestors had been the first. They had seeded life across the galaxy, helped young species grow, built the foundations of everything that exists today. And then they had chosen to start over, to forget their power and earn wisdom the hard way. So we listened in silence. Some faces showed anger, some showed fear, some showed wonder. Lee paid attention to all of them but stopped for none. Explained what the precursors had learned from their long existence. Power without connection led to isolation. Knowledge without humility led to arrogance. The original humans had made these mistakes, and their descendants had no intention of repeating them. She said something that surprised everyone, including her own delegation. And he did not want to rule the galaxy. They did not want to sit at the top of the hierarchy and look down on everyone else. That was the old way, the broken way, the way that had led to the reset in the first place. Humanity wanted something different. They wanted partnership. So proposed dismantling the current conglomerate structure. No more ranking based on age. No more tiers that place some species above others. Instead, a new council where every voice carried equal weight. Decisions would be made together, not handed down from on high. Knowledge would be shared freely, including the knowledge locked in precursor archives throughout the galaxy. Bitter, he demanded to know why humanity would give up the power they had just claimed. He said it made no sense. He said humans must be playing some trick, some long game that he could not see. Smiled at him. She said there was no trick. She said the precursors had learned that standing alone at the top meant standing alone. They had watched younger species suffer and struggle while they sat in their towers of crystalline light. They had forgotten what it felt like to need help, to ask for help, to receive help from others. Set was supposed to fix that. Humans had grown up as the young species, dependent on others, learning from others. They knew what it meant to be small and powerless in a galaxy that did not care about them, and they had decided that no species should ever feel that way again. Forward with Dave from the Sahara complex and the Prime Archive, he showed the assembly maps of sealed archives scattered across the galaxy. Each one contained knowledge that belonged to everyone, not just humanity. Medical advances that could save billions of lives. Technologies that could end scarcity on 1,000 worlds. Histories that every species deserved to know. And he was offering to unlock all of it. They were offering to share everything the precursors had left behind. The only condition was that the sharing go both ways. Every species would contribute what they knew. Every species would help every other species grow. Chamber erupted in debate. Some representatives shouted that there was a trap. Others demanded time to consider. A few quietly nodded their approval. And slowly, the voices of agreement began to outweigh the voices of doubt. Cole rose from the human section and addressed directly. He acknowledged that they had built something remarkable over the past 3 million years. He said humanity respected their achievements and their wisdom. But he also said that the galaxy had grown beyond what any single species could manage alone. It was time to evolve, to become something greater than they had been apart. Silent for a long moment, his dark eyes moved across the assembly, reading faces, calculating outcomes. He was old and clever, and he understood power better than almost anyone alive. He knew that fighting humanity now would mean destruction. The precursor weapon beneath Earth's surface could annihilate his fleet before they fired a single shot. He also saw something else. He saw an opportunity. If he fought, his people would lose everything. If he agreed, they would keep their knowledge, their culture, their place in the galaxy. They would simply have to share their plate with others. Rose slowly and spoke. He said they would accept humanity's proposal. He said they would join the new council as equals, not superiors. He said that because it was wise, not because he was forced. And perhaps, he admitted, it was also because he was tired of standing alone at the top. By one, the other species added their voices. They agreed. The collective agreed. Even the silent one broke their customary silence to express support. By the end of the session, every major species had committed to the new order. So Watchet had and felt something warm spread through her chest. It was not victory. Victory implied that someone else had lost. This was something better. This was the beginning of something new. After the assembly, she stood at a window overlooking the stars. Joined her with cups of coffee from the human delegation supplies. They drank in comfortable silence, watching ships from a dozen species pass by on their way to unknown destinations. Well, Grace found them there an hour later. She reported that the first joint expedition was being organized. Human and alien scientists would travel together to unlock the nearest sealed archive. They would study its contents with partners, sharing everything they found. So asked to lead the expedition, Grace smiled and said she had already assumed as much. Next morning, Lisa boarded a ship that carried crew members from 7 different species. A scientist named to work beside, translating symbols together. Engineer named helped Amy with security protocols. The ship's cook was a who made surprisingly good pasta. Jumped to faster than light speed and watched the stars blur past them. Somewhere ahead, another archive waited with its secrets in its silence. And this time when those secrets were revealed, they would belong to everyone. So thought about the precursors and the choice they had made 60 million years ago. They had wanted their children to learn what they could not teach. They had wanted humanity to grow through struggle and action and love. Hoped they could see what their children had become. She hoped they were proud. The ship flew on toward the unknown, carrying the hopes of a galaxy that had finally learned to stand together. And Lisa smiled, because she knew the journey was only beginning.